Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle, and I am your host, Chris Angle. I am the author of 4 books on philosophy, one of which is The Nature of Aesthetics. These books are available free for viewing online at www.philosophypublishing.com. Along with me is my panelist, Rick Samuelson. Rick graduated from Yale, has an MBA from Wharton, an MA from Tufts. He's retired from the investment banking industry and is now a venture capitalist. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you.
The purpose of the philosophical angle is to examine and explicate the nature of concepts and topics being used in current media and compare its essence with the usage and circumstances and how they're being used. This week, our topic is women in combat. So let's get right to it. Women in combat, why not? Well, it seems they'd like to be like men. Are they? In many ways they are. And are they capable? In many ways they are capable. So intellectually it sounds like a plausible idea, and politically it's right now the environment is conducive to allowing women in combat roles in the military. But that's not the end of the story. Let's take a look to see what the consequences possibly are. And let's start by going back and looking at some explanations of how we evolved as a species. And in order to do that, let's go into some of the books and history of biological anthropology that where we might find some theories that can help us understand whether this is a good idea or not of putting women in combat roles. Let's start by going into one of the premier biological or physical anthropologists who wrote a book back in the 60s and is still in print today and still used and is widely read, is called The Naked Ape. And he summarized the history of the biological animal known as the human being, the Homo sapien, by introducing us to its history, which started back in the plains of Africa, probably about 2 million years ago, with the evolution of a species called Australopithecus. And that proceeded right up to about 500,000 years ago with Homo erectus. So back on the plains of Africa, the environment produced 2 situations. 1, jungles, and 2, after that, plains, when the jungles started to recede as the environment changed and dried up a little, producing some plains. So when that happened, the monkeys and the apes, or the primates in the trees, started to look for a new evolutionary niche. And one of those niches were the plains. And today you can see remnants of that transformation with the appearance of baboons. And baboons don't just go out into the plains, they go out in troops together. And another example of animals adopting to plains and to forests would be wolves. They travel in packs also. Well, the primates came out of the trees, and some of them, apes, began to stand up straight. Also, as we see today, apes can use rudimentary tools. And when they came out of the trees, they had something, a well-organized hand, but that hand then began to develop to be able to use tools, and that enables Homo sapiens to appear, because Homo sapiens have the opposing thumb. Well, when you have the added factor of tools now being used, with the ability of the hand Also, something started to evolve is higher intelligence. The invention of the tool to being able to use tools. And this had a selective advantage. Now, there's a lot of, in biological anthropology, there's some theories as to how the species, biological species, can interact with the environment to produce changes in the genetic codes. That's for a different time, but there are certain theories of how selective advantage works. So now we have a selective advantage for higher intelligence. When you get higher intelligence, you're going to get a larger brain. And the larger brain in order to handle the hand tools. Well, when you get a larger brain to handle the hand tools, you're going to get more time standing upright. Well, what happens when you stand upright? You don't travel as fast. So it's just 2 legs as opposed to 4. So the species starts to slow down. But that's made up for because it has tools to its selective advantage, supported by a higher intelligence. Well, that larger brain has other consequences. Greater development, longer gestation. Longer gestation, larger brain, bigger head. This now requires a larger birth canal. This produces, in the female, a new set of hips, or a larger set of hips. They splay out. What happens when you splay out? It slows down this species. It slows down the running. And so the females can no longer keep up with the males when they're out and hunting and gathering. This is unlike other animals. If you take a look at the baboon troop out there, the females travel just as fast as the males. They're not as big, but they're structurally the same. No longer in the evolution of the human species was this possible because of the hips changed, plus upright, so slowing, and even slower yet. The birth canal enlarges, longer development. Thus, there's a difficulty in birthing. And the development of the child is longer. I don't know if you've ever hung around a barnyard or a field or watched a horse drop its foal. What's interesting is when that happens, the foal gets up immediately and is able to travel. This is evolutionary to its selective advantage because it has to. It can't sit there and a horse can't hang around because wolves or something else, predators will come and attack it and use it for its meal. So animals, after birth, many of them, especially ones that are adapted to plain use, to evolution in the plains, automatically get up immediately and are able to run with the pack. Of course, it's a little shaky at first, but they get along. So, from this, the troop becomes needed of a stationary headquarters where the males can go hunting and the females can nurse the longer development and the rearing that is required because of the higher intelligence and the larger brain. So what happens here? Now you've got the males out hunting. Not all the males can go because there needs to be some protection against predators. So some males remain behind. Females with the young, they nurse. Males remain behind, and something else happens. Pair bonding begins to emerge. Because there's a possible friction, while the males are gone, the females remain unguarded. And the males are always conscious of their genetic reproduction to be continued to the next generation. So, in order to facilitate the cohesion at the stationary headquarters, pair bonding, 2 types. Male versus female, which exists today Marriage is an outgrowth of this male-female pair bonding, and male-male bonding. Males go hunting. They've got to be able to cooperate in their quest for food. So you have two types of bonding. This allows that some males to stay home so that the males out there can trust the females who are rearing their young. And this is for reproductive survival of the species. Remember? You got to be upright. So now another problem comes along. Because they're upright, now reproduction methodology has changed. They've got to, the female has to attract men around to the front for reproduction periods, for reproductive purposes. So the men become visually oriented, the females become attractive. They bring the male around to the front by developing breasts. Other animals don't have breasts. Only the female of the Homo sapien species has breasts. And that purpose, and you know how when women wear a low neckline, they expose it. And what does it look? It actually looks like the derriere. Women put on lipstick to accentuate the color of the lips, to bring the visual aspects of the male around to the front. Thus, invention of the lipstick. And thus, males travel, females attract. And this can be seen on any dance floor throughout the world. The males travel across the dance floor to the females who are attracting their gaze. Let's move on. So next step. So we go back here and we note that the males go hunting and gathering and they travel. And with travel, there's a risk and a danger. And so they're added with an aggression and more physical strength, because risk poses a possible death. So what is further, because of that risk, there are many sperm and there are few or one egg. So if danger steps into the male of the species, reproductive survival is not damaged because there are many sperm. And because of many sperm, they are fit for travel. And the sperm travels biologically, the male travels in general, and the male travels socially. Again, an example is the dance floor, going across that dance floor. Societies historically protect the egg. And that egg needs greater protection. And that protection comes from the male. And that's which enables it to bond with the female, and it protects the egg. And that's why, and socially, it's advantageous. Societies historically have protected the egg. Because, going back to that original tenet, few eggs, many sperm. So society has interrupted this evolutionary process. And it's interrupted it intellectually by saying, well, it really doesn't really make any difference. Women are to help us, we're help to society, and this is another aspect in which they can help. Intellectually, it sounds okay. But biologically, it has not scored well throughout our evolutionary history. But as our societies become intellectually advanced, particularly in Europe and North America, the women not only are starting to look at combat, but they've also entered the workforce. So as they enter workforce and as they enter combat, only one logical event will occur, which is a decline of the birth rate. And we've seen that. Europe and North America have seen a big birth rate decline, probably due to the women in the workforce and becoming more intellectually, having intellectual desires that take them away from the biological evolutionary purposes of producing young so that the species may survive. Well, I've spoken enough here, and let's go to Rick and see what he has to say. Rick, what do you think about women in combat?
Well, I guess I have two comments. One, I think the first question should be, to what extent does this enhance or change the combat readiness of the various units affected? And has that been properly vetted before this decision was taken? I don't know the full facts on that matter. I know an opinion has been rendered by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I don't know what the basis of that opinion was. The second question I have is, will this cost the taxpayer anything? In other words, in order to accommodate women in these combat roles, will additional costs be borne because they need to create separate bathroom facilities or separate quarters or whatever else would be needed to accommodate females in an all-male unit? If that is the case, I would oppose it. Just as I would oppose and do oppose printing ballots in foreign languages. To me, it's an indulgence. It's a waste of taxpayer money, and it is the responsibility of those who want to participate in the electoral process to learn English and be able to vote in English. It's a similar kind of reasoning.
Yeah, you mentioned that the cost might be cost in money. Perhaps there might be human costs also involved. Do you think there would be any repercussions on the human side? In other words, more deaths unnecessarily, or would it be less deaths? Would this help the human costs or make the human costs greater? Would risk of combat go up, or would risk of combat go down for the armed forces? What do you think about that?
Well, having not served myself and not being anywhere near an expert in military preparedness, I have certainly seen articles, op-ed pieces suggesting that deaths would rise if women were put in certain types of combat roles. I'm not in a position to judge, except to say if that is strongly believed by senior officials within certainly elements of the military, then this is a decision that should be considered very carefully, because if it even costs one life, why would you go forward with it unless it was proven otherwise through a very gradual program of experimentation, actually?
Right, it's a program of experimentation, and I believe also that as I pointed out here in the graph here, that there are two types of bonding: male-male and male-female, and suddenly they will become in conflict with each other if they are put together on a side-by-side basis out in the field, out in a combat role together. These bonds will become in conflict, and so I'm worried about that, of course, but also would the criteria in order to enable men in boot camp or any other type of paramilitary or military situation, they have a standard, and unless you get to that standard, you don't get into the force. Would they have to change these standards in order to allow women in combat? And if they do, is that acceptable?
Well, on the face of it, I would say no, although I have also read articles indicating that they've tested certain female athletes, some of them Olympic athletes apparently, and they have been able to pass the difficult requirements of some of the elite units. Of course, there's a whole series of social issues involving, affairs between male and female soldiers in the field, and what that might do to mental preparedness and so forth. Again, if any of this detracts from the overall preparedness of a combat unit, I can't see how you would go forward with it. And above and beyond that, one of the justifications for this new measure is that it opens up jobs for women, which I find rather ironic, since it's a stated priority of the Democratic Party to shrink the military. So while they're, on the one hand, claiming that they're opening up jobs for women, they are, on a net basis, closing down jobs for men, which seems pointless to me.
I noticed that, I think I read somewhere that in the fire departments, in order to get women into the fire departments, they lowered the standard to be able to carry weight from 200 down to 100, or they either to carry, and they allow the 200-pound limit to either, instead of carry, to lower it to being dragged. I suspect with that history, probably the combat criteria would somehow be altered in order to allow women to participate. What do you think about the structural change of criteria such as happened in the fire departments?
Well, you're absolutely right. That is likely to happen because, in fact, Olympic caliber female athletes are probably not going to show up in large numbers to sign up for the military. So the average candidate is not going to be anywhere near that physically vigorous. So you're right. On average, women are weaker than men. That's just a fact. So in order to, particularly for an elite unit like the SEALs, on the face of it, chances are, if they're going to accommodate any significant number of women, they would have to lower the standards.
Right. And is that a desirable thing for those in the military with whom you have to serve? After all, I suppose we could ask anybody the following question if you were to be, because the criteria has changed in the firehouses, so if you were being unconscious, if you were unconscious in a room and a fireman reached in along the window and were to grab you and pull you out, I think everybody would want that arm to be male as opposed to female. I can't imagine anybody saying, "Yeah, I'd rather have the female drag me out." And so I probably would think that the same analogous situation could be found in the military, where if you're side by side with somebody, who would you want that to be? I don't know. What do you think, Rick?
Well, yeah, put in that situation, of course, you want the strongest arm available. Um, I just, the worry, I think, is that uh, this will go forward. The necessary adjustments and costs will be borne to accommodate women, and actually very, very few women are going to opt to join in these types of units. And so it'll ultimately be an exercise in tokenism without improving our force capability and driving up costs in the process. So, and particularly in a time when government spending is, by many measures, out of control, I should think that the bottom line would loom large in any consideration of what to do next with this policy.
Okay, I noted the adjective there, stupid, next to policy. So I think I have to agree. It seems that society is going to pay a price, whether it's possible lowering again of the birth rate, whether it's a economic price to pay by society, or whether it's a human cost, a direct human cost in being less safe in whatever endeavor the soldier is placed in. What do you think about the possibility of women in general in producing less children, and is there any danger of that, do you think, as birth rates clearly have somewhat declined?
Well, it's a sad trend, and we're seeing it repeated over and over again in many advanced industrial nations, and it does not bode well for maintaining a vigorous economy where there's, frankly, social cohesion and solidarity. I think, there's always these unintended consequences. In promoting abortion to the degree that we do here in the United States, for example, you get the inevitable result that women have fewer children. So, the price of choice, quote unquote choice, is a population that grows more slowly, and that unfortunately is not going to be sufficient to support an aging population that, by the way, is living significantly longer than it did 50 years ago. So we've got demographic trends that are at odds, and you would think that we would be promoting policies that would accommodate those two currently opposing trends.
Okay, well said, and thanks very much. That's about all the time we have today for this edition of the Philosophical Angle, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.